아, Hello, everyone. I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting. I will invite you all for drinks after the lecture. Yeah, it's. Thank you for staying here, and I'm very happy to present the work of my practice, how we design, and I would love actually to make a conversation with you afterwards as well. So I will skip some things so we can have time to exchange and to talk to each other and have your questions and extend a little bit more of exchange together this time, especially that you've been waiting this much. So the title of this lecture is What Matters? It's really the question of what matters in architecture. Maybe thinking of what matters, matter, like as material, really is important because as architects we build with materials, we build with what surrounds us, the resources. And the objective of that is always to think of how to make enchanting places. And what is enchanting spaces? What are spaces that really brings us closer to architecture, that transport us? And what is the role of the architect in that sense? It's something that I constantly think about with my practice, with my team. We're in Paris, we're around 30 people, so always thinking about what we are doing and why we are doing it. I think also architecture is very unique because it's a practice that allows us always to ask why we are doing what we are carrying as a profession. And when we're thinking about enchanting places, they are places that delight us, that anchor us in the world. And I think it's very unique for architects that we don't only think about the place where we are, we think about Earth, we think about the world, we think about our carbon footprint, about how sustainable what we're building is. And thinking always about places that link us to nature, how much nature we can integrate in architecture, and what does it mean to integrate nature really. And this is something that I was always looking at because I grew up in Beirut in Lebanon, and always when we were building, we're always discovering archaeologies with nature. And that also relationship to nature, scientists talk about it, and they tell us that we as humans, we are more microbes than we are human beings. So really, we're part of nature. We're continuity to nature. And I would recommend that you read a book by Beatrice Colomina and Mark Wickley that's named Are We Human? It's really interesting. It gives you an idea of what is the relationship we have with this microbe world or invisible world. Enchanting places are also places that ground us, that maybe allow us to think about architecture, not like an object, like a UFO that is landing in a place, but more like like a presence that emerges from the ground, that is sculpted from the place, where we can see like we are digging to emerge a building. It's also about soliciting our memories. Sometimes you go to a place, maybe your grandmother's place or your family place, and it solicits memories. It makes you think of certain moments that you enjoyed, and this is where this place, this atmosphere of the place, like makes you more emotional, more attached to the environment. And this is also what we're trying to make when we're making architecture, is really looking at the research and looking at not only doing just the building, but really what does it mean and what's the narrative behind every building. And that's why when we're doing architecture, I always say it's an archaeology of the future, because it links us to the past, because we're digging in history, understanding what is the typology, for example, of a museum, a house, how it evolves through time, what is specific in Korean architecture, and how we can echo that. But also we're thinking about humanity because we're building for people, so we have to project ourselves in the architecture that we are doing. And we're thinking about nature because that's part of us, and is also how we can be sustainable, how construction can have a positive impact. And every act of architecture has a sense of newness, like a future to it. So it's about transporting our senses, and in my practice, we try to do that in every single scale, moving from the scale of an object like this hanger on an earth bar that we did for a restaurant in Paris. So really how you touch the material to like the finishes of a wall in an apartment for a residence for artists in Paris, where even the finish of this wall is not like white, it has this off-white, it has light that is casting in, and working with light as an element of atmosphere that transport us, whether natural light or artificial light, where we're following those steps and somehow like creating a scenography, a story out of every space that is created. I also like to think about architecture as if you are cooking. You know, sometimes you can have an echo between the cooks, like the chefs, and architecture. And there is a similarity because you combine material, you work with artisans, like this is cooking glass, and glass becomes this material, and then we use it in a chocolate boutique with this chocolate pâtissier who does these amazing, huge penguins in chocolate. And also drawing. Of course, today we work with computer, AI, 3D, but drawing is important because, as Johanni Palasma would tell us, it's really about this kind of haptic quality, this continuity with between our body and the paper that allows us to think, to dream, and to be able to open the boundary of what can architecture be. So like from drawing, it becomes a reality, of course, with a lot of research. And then this is the Serpentine Pavilion. Or, for example, thinking about an exhibition for a textile artist, Olga de Amaral here. And also when we're talking about enchanting places, it could be an exhibition that allows us to meditate. So how do we go to a museum? The museum is not only about just an accumulation of objects. It's about also making you travel in time, allowing you a journey. And the material that we have here is light. So we try to think of how we exhibit the work of this lady who is 92 years old, Olga de Amaral, and she's a Colombian artist. She works with these kind of textile work. And she was doing these amazing landscapes with knitting with fabric. And for a long time, actually, textile art was not recognized as a form of noble art. So our task was really to bring it into another light, to allow it to be beautiful. And the idea was to display that in Fondation Cartier, which is a building that is designed by Jean Nouvel in Paris. And it's open to the outside and bring almost like nature inside with these stones. And use the very little things just to create a relationship between the objects and the ground. And it's all about display, spatial display of those pieces. And also echoing the landscape of the Colombia, where the artist is from. Some other works that she's done are these kind of brumas, and I was thinking how we can display those brumas. They look like colored rain, and maybe they could become like a ceiling. While the first space is about the ground landscape, this one is about like this kind of rain that is falling from the sky, and that reflects into the outside. And then another part of her work is this cocoon space, like in the basement. And here, like instead of displaying art like on a wall, I generally don't like this idea of a decorative element on the wall. Maybe the art can become like a self-standing object that you can turn around, and especially because it's textile, so somehow there is a face, but there's also, the back is also the face. And then the last work that she's done in her career, one of the last is those stellas that are displayed in this kind of circular space. Moving from object to scale of the exhibition, maybe we can talk about the scale of a pavilion that is temporary in its location. So how can we build a pavilion that gathers people? And this is the exercise we had to do for the Serpentine Pavilion. I guess you are aware of the Serpentine like structures. Actually, last year's one was a Korean architect who's Min Suk-sho, who built this one, and I built it just the year before. And I named this pavilion a table, which is like come together on same table, and this idea of togetherness. And the pavilion shape echoes the canopy of the trees. It tries to create a centrality inside this Kensington garden and in front of the galleries of the Serpentine. And to be able to do the design, we started thinking like, what is actually a pavilion? So we tried to make the archaeology of the history of the pavilions. So looking at maybe how in time, like the Greek here, we can see this photo of symposium, like the Greeks, they used to meet lying on the table, all of them eating and then deciding on important matters. So the table was playing an important role. I am Lebanese, I love food, and we very important like what we eat. So this idea of linking to the ground and linking to food, or maybe like thinking about Stonehenge because we are in London. So relating to forms of pavilions in this context. And thinking about the construction system, maybe we can learn also sometimes from nature. Like, and the idea is to build the whole pavilion with this singular element, which are these like vertical columns that are holding this cantilever that is here, and then through arraying it and giving this shape, just giving this kind of more complex and more organic shape that it is. And somehow the pavilion is a place of speech where people gather, and then it becomes a place of talk. And it's also about bringing people together under this kind of canopy. And when designing also, we wanted to link to other cultures. Like here, for example, we started looking at the Dogon people in Mali. And it's really fantastic, this structure with the very heavy roofs here. And actually the elderly people of Mali, they would just like meet here and allow themselves to converse about difficult conversations. And the fact that the pavilion is very low, they couldn't become violent because if they want to stand up and fight, they just hit their head. So it was really fantastic to see like that architecture can govern the way you behave also through like things that we see in history. And the pavilion is also echoing this kind of form of carousel, like this kind of playful structure that you see sometimes with swings, and trying to really give this fun aspect also of this place. Another structure also is temporary, and again here in wood construction. Why wood? Because wood is always this kind of very light construction that allows you minimal foundation that you can assemble, disassemble, so it's much more sustainable as a construction as well. And it's a pavilion that wants here to transport us into this idea of a boat that is an open boat, and it's very close to here, so it's in Osaka in Japan. If you, I don't know if you went to Universal Expo, it's really interesting to go see all the different buildings, and but also be critical about how we build temporary. What is it a pavilion today actually? So it's the Bahrain pavilion, and Bahrain is this country really close to Saudi Arabia here with a circle, and it's positioned in Japan. And the idea was how to create like an echo, a relationship between two islands, Bahrain and Japan, in a place that is in Osaka that is also linked to the water, and with this ring that was built by Su Fujimoto, and this is the pavilion we built all in wood. And the building really wants to echo the form of a boat, because the boat is what connected really the different countries, like this idea of traveling. But also in Manama, Manama is the capital of Bahrain, you can see a lot of these dhow construction that are like boats in wood. They talk about craft. And we wanted that the pavilion is mastered by Japanese craftspeople, so really that we are able to assemble and disassemble easily. It's all made with unengineered wood, that it's not laminated. You know, you have engineered wood, which is pieces of wood that are laminated and glued together. And when you do that, you cannot reuse basically in the market. And this is unengineered in the sense that it's raw wood that you can actually use back in the construction process when the project is dismantled. And then inside, there are these walkways where you discover the exhibition. And when you are inside this hall, it's like this, although the space is really small, I think sometimes our role also as architects is to create a delightful space with the little that you have and give like this speciality. So the idea was really to bring this kind of volume inside that like width and play with the verticality and allow projection to happen on the screens behind, but also to allow like different perspectives from different balconies on this space. And just recently, this is a place where they did the celebration for the National Day for Bahrain. You can see here at night like this lighting from inside. It's from a smaller scale, like the house can really be an intimate space, and always the question is how to create spaces that are human. You know, when you're designing, when you're drawing a line, always thinking about who you are drawing with. You know, sometimes today with the computer, with the drawing on, on AutoCAD, we tend to forget like the meaning of this line and the relationship that it has with humans that will practice the space, that will walk with the space. So here, when we are designing this small house, we were looking at the history of different house construction in different times in Japan, looking at the site, which is this kind of very typical suburban sites, and trying to maybe think of how to maximize space for this house. And instead of just building a volume, like really creating gardens around those volumes that are on the ground that become almost like a foundation for the upper volume that is a symbol of the house and becomes the meeting point of the different dwellers of this house. So really within the very small scale, by opening up like perspectives with the greenery, the house expands, becomes much more bigger as a space than it actually is. And then the upper space is the space of work, and that is of intimacy. And then from house, a small house, maybe talking about this idea of intimacy, of dwelling on a larger scale in a residential tower in Beirut, but also thinking about what role can architecture play in healing us or reconciling ourselves with the past. Because Beirut, and this tower is in Beirut, is a city that had lived a lot of wars, a lot of instability. You could see here like how it's in constant construction, almost like Seoul. Actually, I identify with the place here because there is sense of similarity also with the construction that is happening here. We can see like these tower building and developers building, but also old houses that are talking about the history of the city. And this building really talks about how we can build a tower in this context that is more vernacular, that can echo local ways of construction instead of just another glass tower that would look like any other place in the world. And especially in a place that is about sometimes wars, but it's also about extreme life and always like a desire to party and to have a great time. And the site of the project is very close to the city center. And city center of Beirut was completely demolished after the war. And we have little remaining of how it looked after the war. I remember that because I lived it. But sometimes like when I grew up, I was like, where are the traces actually of the city center that was completely demolished? And the only traces that we find are some of the photos that were taken by some photographers, one of whom is Fuad Al-Khouri, who happened to be the client actually for this project. And we could see like these kind of eaten up structures and this frail environment. And in this building, I really wanted to echo this history and think about how we can create another form of tower that talks about the opening as an act of eating up a volume from the volumetry of a space, but also the window as more of a frame to the outside, like bringing in basically the city almost like an artwork within the dwelling itself. So really like allowing us to maybe understand the city differently with its absurdity, sometimes with these, ventilation machines, or like this kind of a runway that just cuts in the middle of the city. And like another is framing the sea, and we are here very close to the silo that where the explosion had happened in Beirut. And then again, when it was rising, the idea is the skin. The skin of the building has to really be more sensitive. It has to talk about the hands of the many workers that are coming from different places of the world, like from Syria, that they are also suffering the war, but also of sharing the building process, the emotional process of constructing with those like people who are doing it. And the idea was just like almost like emerging from earth, as if it's like chiseling the ground, and that we could maybe imagine that we can create our own tools as architects to create the facade and to be able to combat. So the whole facade was done by hand, doing the plaster, and then like as if we are combing hair, like combing the whole elevation. So it's like this process, and we could see here the rails. Actually, they were installed on rails, and the whole process started from the upper floors lower to the bottom. And then when we open the windows, maybe the idea is to bring nature as part of the scale, actually, of our construction. So in Beirut, the nature does not exist like in Paris. I live in Paris at the moment, like, the parks are all tidied up, cleaned up, the tree looks square. And here the idea, like in Beirut, you can see the nature is present organically, it's alive. And the question was how to bring it part of architecture and maybe like allow different scales of nature to exist, whether in smaller scale or maybe a tree, and allow also architecture to contain the different lives of nature that could be part of what we do. And in that sense, it was anchored in the ground. We could see like it frames also the outside, something that is particular here. You see this window here that shows the outside. It almost feels like a painting inside. So really this kind of also echo to photography and to the way we could look at the city. This is a view from the entrance, which was a small space, but really trying to give this idea of a cocooned also environment. And then in 2020, just when we were delivering the project, the explosion of Beirut happened, and it was happening in the silo, this grain silo that is on the port. They say nitrate ammonium. We don't know yet how this happened. But what was really impressive is that the building really stayed, because it was no cladding, it was really part of the building. So the facade was really resisting that explosion, although all the interior was exploded. So for me, it was a question whether this is a way to build in a resilient manner, really relating to a context like Beirut, and how can architecture in a way respond sometimes to those contexts and situations. We could see in these photos they were still taking out the rubbles, and people are laughing despite everything always in Beirut. And this is again here, they were still cleaning the rubble from the explosion, and as it's cleaned, just sitting outside again, enjoying the sun. This idea of a tower is always about connecting to nature, and here there's another project that we are doing at the moment in Toyama in Japan, and it's part of a whole development that is named Play Earth. It's an observatory building, and it's a development that wants to echo, nature and allow people to enjoy it in Toyama in Nanto city. And the whole site is really will be developed with different cottages and dwellings, camping site. It's about really like the kids enjoying also nature, and we are building this observatory on the top of the hill. And it's in Nanto city. Nanto is really known also with the straw building and really this traditional construction. And it's about the Satoyama feel in Japan. You know, Satoyama is really this idea of linking to the province, linking to nature, and it reminded me of those animation of Miyazaki. And when we're given to talk to make an observatory, the question is how do you build an observatory and what is an observatory? So again, here we went into a research into different forms of observatories. So looking, for example, here like the tomb structures were like also observatory structures. The temples were supposed also like had observation like meaning. Other forms that of mounds as well, but something similar in all of them, whether they are scientific observatories or more symbolic ones, was the predominance of a circular form. And we wanted to, in a way, echo that circular form. So we started first, before getting the idea, is like testing different models. And models are important because they allow us to make errors and to test with very simple materials and allow take photos of them and just project into what could the project be. So the first ideas were like maybe we can like build a tree, like it's maybe the observatory can be almost like a tree house that you are climbing up into the tree house, and then you can see it between the different trees here. So, and then you just like go up and it has this wood structure that spikes out. And talking about spikes, remembering like one of the knots that I picked up in the site, maybe the whole building can be like this kind of a spiraling structure with the spikes out like all wood. And then as you move up, you have these kind of smaller spaces, almost like in a tree house that allow you to like dwell, look at a library, look at another type of space. And again, moving from this idea, we started doing the model and to really test the proportion. We found it a little bit too fat here with the model, so we shrunk slightly the size of the building when we did the model. And this is how it looks at the moment, and we're starting construction soon for the project. I think like enchanting spaces or spaces that matter, that allow you to be different, can be also applied to a manufacturer space, like an industry. It doesn't have to be only like a museum or a nice house. So the question is, how can a manufacturer make us So we looked at here like the manufacturer for Hermes, and this is a building to make leather. And we wanted to echo with this building all the precision actually of leather work. So it's a building that is really surrounded by so many other factories. You know, always factories, they are built in these amazing environments like nature, but then they are like metal boxes and really they ruin the natural environment. And we wanted to give a dignity back to this typology, which is industrial typology. And especially like that the making inside is so precise and it's so delicate and related to the question of the hand and the craft. And crafting architecture is about building with a certain resource. So we started looking like what could we build with, and especially what we can source locally. Because this manufacturer is the first low carbon energy positive building in France, which means it's a very sustainable construction. And to do that, we have to think of local resources, not bringing our material from far away, or maybe trying not to use concrete for this construction. And since we are in Normandy, the earth is really great to build with bricks. So we thought, let's build with bricks, use the earth of the site, and then manufacture 550,000 bricks with the local brick artisan that is in place, use these traditional ovens to construct, and then dry the bricks and then make them with the team. And then it was really a process of handwork, especially that the artisans at the moment, they don't build really new construction with bricks. They were just renovating old construction. So the question was really maybe like trying to reuse bricks as a way of building contemporary architecture, and also teaching again the masons how to build with bricks. Something that was particular was the pride of the mason when building, but also that they printed our drawings 1-to-1 scale, and they really tried to copy the facade to build. And then when you're building with sustainable materials, during construction is really beautiful materials, and you can see earth, you can see wood and structure of brick, which is really beautiful, like a composition of natural materials. And this manufacture is also a place where they do saddlery for horses. So it's saddlery making. So the idea was how to echo also in the form of the facade the gallops of the horse. Not only that, actually, when you build in brick, this natural span is an arch. This is what Louis Kahn tells you. If I listen to a brick, it tells me that I want to be an arch. And it also echoes this idea of the gallops of the horse. As you see, like these curves that we can see with the pieces that are made, but also this movement that is that of this animal that is very specific to this manufacture. We could see also that a lot of these curves and the curve of the prototypes that they use for the saddlery, they echo always the objects that are manufactured there, and this kind of continuity of that lines that give a softness also to the space and allow the people coming to work to almost feel that they're coming on vacation. And this is actually what they told me, like, oh, it feels like we're not going to work. It's like a monastery or like a place that we are discovering. And it's really important that the places where we spend so much time, whether it's in university or in work, that they are spaces that we really want to be there and we want to spend time there. And then when we were doing the landscape with the landscape architect, we thought that maybe we can use the earth of the ground that we actually excavated to create all the landscape. So we really reused it and created these soft mounds that created the specificity of the landscape. If you go to Venice Biennale, Architecture Biennale, the also building is exhibited at the moment, and you can really discover all the structure of the ceiling that is knitted a little bit like a weaving work. Into a museum, maybe enchantment is also a possibility of surprising us. Like when you go into a space somehow and into architecture, you want to be surprised, you want to see the space around you differently and be transported. And this is a museum with which I started my first partnership practice in 2006. And I was 26 when I won this project. It was an open competition. And we won that project and established my practice. And it's the Estonian National Museum, and Estonia is south to Finland. It's in Tartu, which is the cultural capital of Estonia. And the objects are really those that talk about the history of Estonia. One of the particularities of the site was that when we were looking at the maps, we saw that there's this big scar that is just cutting in the landscape. And actually, the competition brief, they didn't really talk about it. They assigned this as a site for the project. It was really strange, like, what is this actually? And how can we just build here without understanding what exists on site? And when we started the archaeology of the site, we understood that this is the place where a lot of riots happened because Estonia was under Soviet occupation. It had its independence in 91. And this runway was one of the largest ex-military airfields in the Baltic states. So the idea came that actually we wanted that this museum connects to this runway. And instead of being just a building independently sitting on the site that was assigned by the jury, that it really extends into that ground and dives into the landscape and maybe transforms also the landscape, that this ground becomes part of the museum, it becomes a platform for manifestation, and that the scale inside the building is this kind of smaller scale spaces, and that there's a sense of generosity in between these volumes. Something that we saw also, that all the open spaces that we created in between the different volumes became the places where really culture occurred, where they did their manifestation. And then you have between the shop and the boutique or the library. It was really a great learning experience because it's starting 40,000 square meters and trying to, how to structure a team, how to make a project happen, and what a museum means, because discovering that the museum is not only about exhibition, it's all the spaces of work that are in part of the museum, where they produce cinema, where produce books, conserve works as well, and do textiles. And just to end actually on the scale of a museum, talking about the British Museum, and maybe museums also can remind us how extraordinary the world is. And I'm showing you here part of the competition submission that we did for the British Museum that we recently won to do in London. And before we do the building, we're trying to understand, the collection, understand where it's coming from, how does it influence the space. So it's really a mood board of research and of thinking, and how we can actually, within this museum, create another delightful space than the Great Court. Today, you enter into the British Museum, you're directly, attracted by the Great Court that was, especially with the canopy, designed by Foster and Partners. And then you enter into the other spaces and you're just like enclosed inside. And we started digging into the architecture of the existing building, like understanding where it comes from. And we discovered that was really part of this infatuation with the classicist architecture, the fascination also with the Greek ruins. And it was that period with where a lot of elite would travel and would discover the world, but also have a certain colonial gaze as well at the other places. So this building really stigmatizes also this classical architecture and almost like temple. And so the question is how to make it more inclusive, more humane, and allow it to be this museum for the world. And of course, when intervening on an existing structure, we looked at the history of the building, how it transformed. In the beginning, like the court was open, and then suddenly it was enclosed with the canopy at some point, and then the building started to be added, and then at the end, it really suffocated. So we were like, how we can bring space, how we can create like a breathing moment in this building. And especially also talk about all the history and the millions of objects that talk about millions of years of history, human history. The challenge was really to channel people. You have moments also where you have ventilators still in the building, and allow the collection to be more understood really, that could talk about history, but also talk about contemporary life. So we were starting to do this design, started imagining the journey of two people coming from Hong Kong and discovering the museum. And as they discovered the museum, they discovered that there's a new space that is created. And it's almost like a big space that echoes the central library. And this space creates a like a large volume where you can see the sky and where you can almost discover the proportions of this mausoleum, Halicarnas's mausoleum, through the objects that are displayed. And then there's light inside, but also the material that is used is all sustainable. It talks about earth. It allows us to maybe think of an architecture that is more in tune with sustainability, with ecology, and also thinking about how to do a museum with different systems of control in terms of energy, because museums like somehow they consume a lot of energy. So because you need to always have a stable temperature in terms of cooling, but also stable humidity. So you need constantly to climatize those spaces. So it's very important to think about the strategy of how do you climatize and how do you design spaces so you don't need a lot of energy. And this is possible through materials, but also through assigning different spaces where the control of energy is very different. And then also using material, because we are going to demolish some spaces, maybe some material we can reuse to build with. Also creating different intimacies of spaces, like smaller and larger spaces, experiences that could be echoing different intimacy or different scales, that it's not a monotonous experience within the museum. So the journey of the two couples were like just moving in the museum. They enter, they see that it's manifestations of different cultures. And then they see that actually a museum is not a storage, it's not a warehouse, it's not all archaeology, it's not a screen, that it's full of objects, and it's almost like an archaeology of the future. And here we started imagining a journey of 4 different stories, just to give an illustration. One is the Assyria and Lachish like battle. Another one is the tomb of Hornichitif and coffin, the mausoleum of Halicarnassus, and like a set of potteries and ceramics that are displayed in a building. It's like almost a journey through time and space within those. And how do you create like different experiences within this and allow the building and the objects to be actively engaging you with history and somehow maybe allowing you to untangle preconceptions? Because sometimes we have preconceptions, like if it's a place like Iraq, okay, that's a desert and there's no culture. I just came back from Uzbekistan. It's such a fantastic history and culture, and museums allow us really to reconnect with the world and understand that culture and history existed in different layers as well in different places. So when we were about to display the Lamassu, which are these like large structures, like sculptures that were displayed at the door of temples, we wanted to echo their original place, but also the fact that they are transported into the museum. So we didn't want to have them sticking in the wall. Instead, we built this kind of scaffolding structure that can be a place where people can interact with. They can talk about the history of, like how the Lamassu came here, but also have a contemporary installation sometimes around. And then when we're looking at the siege of Lachish, we looked at how those reliefs were existing in the palaces, tried to understand the proportion, to display them, but also talk about like tactility of the space, the battle itself, allow sometimes digital tools to animate and tell more the story of those battles and what happened inside. And then moving from there, there was the story of Hornichitif. So Hornichitif was this priest in ancient Egypt, and there was a procession actually how he lived, and the coffin and his own body, like a mummy, which is human remain, really talks about the world when we analyze it. And today with the current... Oh. I hope only the computer slept. Yeah, oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, so basically what we see here, like the CT scan, today with the technology, they could really analyze the body and understand what the priest had eaten, understand what the agriculture was at that time around. And they also saw that he had a problem in the knee. So it's really fantastic, like how much you can understand from the world at the Egyptian, at that time in Egypt through the current scientific tools. But also in the this display, we wanted to echo something that we see on his coffin, which is the goddess Nut. And goddess Nut is this wonderful lady that really guide the body of Hornet-Shetif in the afterlife. And so the whole space was this kind of curved space that is almost like a sky that is like stellar sky, and within this kind of vertical column that has the coffin itself. And this verticality is echoing also the temple of Karnak. And then we can see here like this idea of the verticality, but also in a space like generally in the British Museum, the space is very busy. So really trying also to allow people to see the space when it's really very busy. You can see the verticality of this volume. And then from the moment or from the tomb of Hornet-Shetif, you go to the mausoleum. And the mausoleum is this idea of echoing, this form of mausoleum that existed in present-day Turkey, and more specifically in Bodrum. And it was the mausoleum of two figures, Mausolus and Artemis, who are actually the sculpture of them is on the top of the mausoleum, and it was overlooking the whole city. And today it's just a site, an archaeological site. And we wanted to echo this archaeological site by the ground that we see here, like this idea of like the objects that are displaced at the moment in London, but also allow this ground floor to become a stage where maybe like kids could come here and learn about the objects, but also sometimes we can have more contemporary installations or have models of the mausoleum, how it could have existed before. So this volume of the space is also allowing different layers, like this kind of vertical and horizontal layer that we can find here, but also this possibility of having educational spaces as part of the museum, where you could see dance and performances here, or like cinema. And then you can see it here animated, where people could walk around. So the museum is not just like a place for objects, and it allows you really to understand that the history of the world is a history of civilization, but it's a history of world civilization in the sense that like they were always evolving in similar or diverse ways. There was always interaction between us as humans in different scales and different parts. And talking about that and this idea of interaction, we wanted to think of a vertical gallery that is constructed by all the reused material from demolition. And this vertical gallery would allow us to put all the ceramics from different places, moving from Asia to Europe, and the production actually of ceramic that is really related to us as a human from ancestral times. So really allowing people to link back to Earth, but also see this kind of light, relationship to light that evolves in that space. And here we see our friends looking back at this space. And then this idea also that this ground becomes also a place of performances. And when we wanted to do this film for the competition, we couldn't find, our visualizer didn't find a better dancer. Sorry for that. but you have to see her dancing. And we tried another music to see if she dances better.
Pump the jam, pump it up while your feet are stumping. And the jam is pumping. Look ahead, the crowd is jumping. Pump it up.
It doesn't change much. So for us, the future of the museum is really humane. It's not just about innovation. It's not really about creating something only new, but it's for the sake of novelty, but it's really finding ways to profoundly improve human experiences, environmental sustainability, and the built environment as a whole. And I will finish the presentation by this movie that we also made for the project.
How to reimagine the British Museum. A museum of the world and for the world.
The British Museum was founded as a place of wonder and knowledge. How can this vision endure today's challenges? Can its collection serve as a bridge between cultures, connecting worlds and fostering dialogue?
Could it become a space of endless possibilities, a home, a laboratory, a library, a school, and an atelier all at once? A place that nurtures and inspires, where humanity collaborates to celebrate shared commonalities while exploring differences. A place of discovery, a place where the hidden is seen, a place of collaboration where forgotten stories are told, healing past scars and deepening our understanding of the present.
The objects of the museum are guides to parallel worlds, embodying stories of the past. In 9th century BCE Assyria, the Lamassu stood as guardians of ancient palaces. Today, they serve as vessels of conversation and imagination.
Transported by raft and sea, the journey of the Lamassu to the British Museum reflects both displacement and transformation. Can they now stand as symbols of resilience and rebirth, fostering discussions that spark collective creativity?
From the 9th century BCE Assyria to the 3rd century BCE Egypt, the mummified remains of Ar-Najatif connected us to the stories of his life. His coffin, a cosmic map, guided his soul to the afterlife and reveals the networks that connected his world to others.
In 4th century BC Caria, the mausoleum of Harnakenassis rose as a wonder of the ancient world, a fusion of Greek and Persian traditions. Its grandeur symbolized power and identity, leaving a legacy that continues to inspire awe and creativity today.
In 4th century BCE Lycia, monumental tombs blended Anatolian and Mediterranean traditions, revealing a culture shaped by trade and connection. These artifacts show how ideas moved across borders, linking ancient worlds to ours and prompting us to create with our hands and ask, what binds us together across cultures and centuries? What lessons can we carry forward?
So let's reimagine together, sharing in a connected history to help build a collective future colored with diversity.
Thank you so much. Thank you for staying and listening. If you have questions.
Yeah, if there's any question, please have your hands. So 질문 있으면 손 들고 해주셔도 됩니다. 네. 일부러 학생들이랑
얘기하려고. First, thank you for your great lecture, and I hope you have an enchanting time here in Korea. As an architecture student, I'm contemplating living, working abroad. So I get inspired by the figures like Zaha Hadid, Daniel Libeskind, or I.M. Pei, who transforms their experience of displacement into their original architectural language. So my question for you, Lina, is how the emotional notion of homeland lives inside you and becomes the source of inspiration and inner strength, particularly when you work in different cultural contexts where you were born and raised. And also, I'll be honored if you share some advices about what should we do, learn, and experience here in our homeland for who considering a similar path like you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think the question is how my homeland inspires me in the work that I do somewhere else. And I think the fact that I grew up in Beirut, in this place that is really about diversity, because there's a lot of different religions, different cultures that are living together, that fought together as well, where there's always conflict, but also reconciliation. And there's a lot of diversity in the urban environment, and that allowed me to always be open to other cultures and try to always seek the understanding of the other. But also in Beirut, there is always like this kind of contradictory urban situation that you can find, creativity that is always present, and the presence of nature that is very strong, the light, the colors. So all those elements are things that I have sometimes nostalgia to, like I always have thinking about them. I have them in my memory. And I try to seek in every project this kind of intensity of light, the intensity of material, the presence of nature, and presence of embracing human beings as well in architecture. All this while listening at every place. And to listen to every place, you have to research it. You have to understand, read about it, look at culture, look at what they have built before, why they have built before. Like now we are working on a project in Seoul, actually, and I'm looking at temples, for example, and trying to understand all the symbolics of all the ceramic tiles that mean protection, spirituality. Some of them have a dragon symbol or others, and they have meanings. So really understanding the meaning of space and the meaning of building. And to do that, you have to be curious. You have to look at knowledge and build it. And that really leads after to an informed intervention or architecture that is anchored in a place. That is not only about referencing the architect, but also that references the place itself. So people that are part of the place.
Hi, my name is Chihui. I'm a curator at the MMCA Korea, the National Museum, but also doing a PhD student at the architecture school. I think your background in archaeology had a great impact on your inquiries about, or your processes of conceiving an architecture piece. And when you're doing that, it's the research part spans not just the recent history, but it goes back all the way to the BCs. And I think I'm very curious about how does that kind of knowledge that you obtained as an archaeological scholarly academic background impacting on your architecture practice? And also, it seems like perhaps it's related that you have a great respect on artisanry in the production, not only for the craft aspects of people who actually conducting the labor, but also you yourself as a craftsman of model making, drawings, all this haptic experience. So my second question would be, where do you get inspired for this kind of craftsmanship? And I saw a little bit of your collaboration with Ali Cherry, who's both artist and archaeologist, and also very quickly Yu Fan's painting just passed by, which is Korean painter. So yes, I wonder like where does that kind of source of inspiration of craftsmanship and artisanry comes from? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. Yeah, as you say, like the question of archaeology is something that was present in my upbringing and relationship to the city of Beirut. But I always see archaeology more like a research process. Like it's about really every project is about understanding the place, and then it allows you to dig deeper. And as we do every design, we can almost produce a book actually that is related to the research of a museum, or like maybe what like the city of Seoul, or so it becomes really a kind of touching on the knowledge of the place and a multidisciplinary approach to things, and that really builds up a memory for the project. So they're not like separated elements, although the research can be self-standing by itself, but architecture needs research really to exist. And it's not linear, so sometimes you start with ideas and or subjects, but then you have to connect them so it becomes a narrative and becomes a presence into a project. If I take like the manufacture of Hermes, for example, we started looking at what is the history of Hermes as a family. They started with the horse saddlery, but also they have these square scarves and so many forms actually that are present, but also looked at the Normandy area, the bricks, and all those together, they actually became the shape of the building and became like the essence of what is the architecture. And then your second question, which was about the crafts. Yeah. And I think the craft for me is very important because, like, for example, when I came here, I directly went to see like lacquer people that work with the material. I looked at different ceramic makers, at like painters that work in temples. I visited, a Buddhist nun to understand how she lives in the place. Like all those, stories and artisans' work and crafts really inspire my work constantly because they first allow the architecture to be grounded, allow me to understand the culture where I'm working as with humans that are part of this culture, and also inspire me as maybe my artistic part also because I love drawing and painting, and it's somehow allow me to continue to do that.
Thank you for the lecture. And my question is also that kind of shape that came from your research. So I found that when you say like echoes, and showing us the image board that you collecting, but I wonder what is the standard for the image selection, because in these days, many students in architects are going to Pinterest or some kind of site and scrap a lot of images, but actually that is not give energy to their project. But I found your project are really powerful, and you are showing the many image board of each project. So I wonder how it influence your project. Yeah.
This is a great question actually for today because, it's the difference between knowledge and information. Because today with Google, with Pinterest, with all those tools, and even more now with ChatGPT and AI Journey, and you just type something and you get information. You get the first layer, and you get the same actually figures coming over and over. So it doesn't really allow you to build knowledge. It doesn't allow you to build actual layers of deep knowledge. So you have to go further. You have to use libraries, you have to go to resources online where they have really more of encyclopedic approach to things, where you look at a picture but you really understand what you're looking at. So you have a narrative, you have the text, you have the historical relationship to that. So it's not about just a nice texture or an image that you are looking at. You're looking at beyond what is this image is giving you to understand what it means. Like if I'm looking at Stonehenge, I'm looking at how it was represented in different ways, but I'm also looking at its plans. What is the understanding of Stonehenge in the past? How did it, is it about understanding the sky? Still until today, we don't know actually why this was built in history, and all the drawings that were made. So you dig deeper actually in the understanding of what you're, the object that you're looking at or the space that you're looking at. If you're looking at museums, it's not like I'm not looking at, maybe there's a nice museum of Tadao Ando or of, always the same names. No, I'm looking maybe what is a museum. If you look at history, it was maybe a cabinet of curiosity in the past. Historically, it was the pyramid because they were used to put, the ownings of the kings and the queens as part of the burial. And maybe it evolved at some point to become an institution because then there is a sense of, the concept of museum emerged in Europe with Centre Pompidou or with the British Museum. But historically, it's like a museum, and museum is this like temple that existed on the top of a hill. So it's like really trying to push your understanding and the knowledge. So it's not like this first layer of imagery that Midjourney has access to.
Thank you.
First, thank you for your great lecture. And my question is about the impression or the style of your projects. When I saw your project for the first time, I immediately felt that the impression, I don't know why, but all the impressions of your all projects have such dignity or elegance, and I don't know why, but so my question is, do you intend to achieve such atmosphere or not? And if so, I was wondering why.
It's interesting question because it's about because sometimes in architecture you try to think there's a style. What is the style of what you're doing? I think the question of style was really related to the precedent decades of architecture, where you would see a Zaha Hadid style because it's inspired by Claude Parent and it's about lifting the ground and the constructivist, or like Daniel Lipskin, and all those emerged actually from tools of architecture, from the advent of AutoCAD 3D and these kind of vanishing points that we could create, which is amazing. But then it produced a very specific style of architecture. Or Frank Gehry, which is amazing objects, like I don't know if you've seen the Simpson sketch it, just crush the paper and then it becomes an architecture. It's really surprising, but it's a style of architecture that you could find in different places, and that you want a Frank Gehry building, and then it becomes this identifiable form. In the way we're producing architecture, we're trying to really listen to the place, and maybe the common thread is this idea of listening and of really doing something deeply connected to a place, and in that there's some kind of maybe dignity that emerges, as you say, because there's a sense of respect that is there from listening to the place of its context. And maybe there's a sense of restraint as well, because just doing what's needed without sometimes, screaming too loud. So really finding the right vocal vocality to be able to be in respect to the place. And maybe this is elegance, I don't know. But there is no formal style that is repeated in a way.
Thank you for your presentation. So my question was about your topic of like soliciting our memories. So I'm actually also like from Bilad al-Sham. So you know, as an Arab architect, when I think of like places, I also think of memories. And unfortunately, like I think our countries, when we think of them also, we think of memories related to war and turmoil, especially, you know, like right now in Beirut, in Aleppo, or even in Gaza. So I was thinking, like, as an Arab architect, how can we kind of think of our future in cities that are being demolished? Like, for example, you know, recently the AUB School of Architecture was talking about how there's a case of herbicide when it comes to how the urban fabric of Beirut or Gaza is being kind of demolished or like attacked. So as an architect, again, like how are we about to like tackle these issues? And I think especially like in a city like Beirut, where like you can still see, you know, the bullets in the buildings and stuff like that. So like with everything that is happening now on a much larger scale, how are we supposed to like work with that and kind of uplift our countries, but also like not necessarily hold on to these like memories of war that come with a lot of pain and suffering?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, that's the common context that we come from. And it's always a very difficult question, you know, like how can we act when these contexts? And I think there are multiple scales. The role of the architect as part of the policy making and is present in thinking about construction and reconstruction priorly to doing it, and generally the reconstructions always happen very fast, and they're about survival really. And that's the problem, because they erase the memory of the city. We build without any thinking. It becomes a real estate operation afterwards. And this is where architects have to be present as thinkers, as carers of the value of the built space, but also carers of the heritage and of the meaning of identity, because we want to be identified. We want to, in the places where we are, there's a sense of rootedness. And there's another scale with the individual architect working on an individual project, and where here questions of scars and bullets and history are present. And I think our role in that is to really be sensitive, to understand the context, and to think of the language of architecture that we're bringing, and how it can be one that allows communication, that is not just solitary building, but it allows conversation about what had happened in a non cliche way, gimmicky way, because it's not like keeping the bullet and cleaning them, but you have to renovate. But how do you keep the history, and where is memory when you renovate in that sense?
Thank you for sharing your amazing works. And my question might be a little bit overlapped with previous one, but yeah, I was fascinated by the wall full of images, and I think a lot of us are the same. So you've mentioned that it pushes you to the dimension of knowledge. And my question is how those knowledge translated to your work and your drawings and buildings. That's it.
Thank you. When you see the boards that we create, they are sometimes hang on the wall and sometimes they are booklets. And you know, we have to trust our unconscious and the mind of human mind, because there are things that you are conscious of, but what you read, what you learn, it's also registered in your unconscious and your instinct and everything in this accumulation of knowledge. And somehow it comes together to become a project through this idea or the listening that you bring through. And also through making sense of the relationship between the different researches that you make. For example, maybe giving an example of the project in Bahrain, you know, when we were starting to look at what is common between Osaka and Manama, the city in Bahrain, how can we create an intersection, because they are, you know, two different countries, and we want to talk about common language. So we started exploring the idea of the sea, and then from the sea researching boats, and then we understood that you know, Manama is very well known in boat construction, and that also how do we build a pavilion that is both extraordinary, transports us, but also that is sustainable. So came the size of the wood. We researched as well the material locally. So, you know, all these like elements then come together to become a thread or a narrative for a project. And it's not an imposed narrative. It's not about just I want to create a story and I impose it on the project. It becomes really embedded in the architecture. Someone non-architect comes to the space would feel, oh, like this is reminding me of a boat, and I feel like there's a movement in this, in those wood, but also the inside is, you know, like a sail, etc. So you have to come to the office, you will see. It's the one without.
Yes, thank you for the lecture. And as I see all of your projects presented today, what I found was there was like a emphasized maybe like a tactile connection between the architecture and the human. So as a person who also believes in the power of like the raw, unpolished and natural materials, my question is, do you believe if those enchanting spaces are also possible even without those kind of materials, maybe like using only like the super engineered materials like CLT? That's my question.
If it's possible without those materials. I think yes, it's possible. It's about, of course, like material economy is important to think about, because today with the climate change, it's an urgent issue. You have to think of how do you use biosourced, geosourced material, or maybe like material that are manufactured, but that allow you a sense of sustainability in the sense that you are assembling them. So it's a way that you assemble, disassemble, reuse the material, and allow you to be more ecological in the way you're thinking about space. The question of enchantment or the quality, beauty of the space is not only related to the material. It is something that is evoked through the material, but it's also related to the light that you bring into the space, to the form of the space, to the size, to the way you relate to the human at the end, that the experience that you provide within that space. So it's not a shell. It's really this inherent experience that you are able to generate as an architect. If you're interested in technology, it's very good. You don't have to only be interested in wood.
Ah, first of all, thank you for your lecture. I was very impressed by the strong consideration of the historical relationship, not only with the building, but also with the surrounding area while constructing. The explanation of the exhibition was especially very interesting in terms of how to show the works of art and heritage. But I wonder if the location of the works was in the consideration, like how will you show those artworks is very important, but what about where they actually are? Like those works may not be thought of, especially in a historical context. Like for example, there are still serious discussions in British museums to return works from other countries, or I wonder if you have any other ideas for this.
Thank you. Yeah, that's also the thing that I'm always faced with when I'm working in most of the projects. Like, for example, in Estonia, there was this airfield that is the military airfield where, planes used to, military planes used to land, and how to link to that was a big debate also as part of Estonia. So architecture, in a way, generated that debate of how do you link to that history and what role architecture can play. In the British Museum, it's a different conversation. It's about the provenance of many of the objects, like the Parthenon, and in a way, what architecture can do, what can be my role in that context. And of course, for me, in most of the works, I'm very interested to show not only the history of the works, but also the contemporary places. And that's why, for example, when we were dealing with the Lamassu, which are these big sculptures that were on the gates, protecting the gates of the Assyrian palaces, it was about not having them part of architecture in the building of the British Museum, but they're freestanding. They're almost ready to go again to another place. But they also talk about the contemporary place. They talk about Iraq at the moment, allow you to be conscious actually of how the place is at the moment, why they moved here, what's the history. So really like architecture becoming a vessel for those questions and allowing debate also to happen. So that's why also in some of the spaces we imagined the stage when we had the dancer at the end doing her break dance. But the idea is that you could have conferences, talk about, maybe Halicarnas's mausoleum, the archaeology as it is today, debate about whether those objects have to go back, etc. I don't have the power of telling, okay, let's bring the marbles back, but I have maybe the tool to create a space that allows that dialogue, that is not neutral. Anyone? Thank you so much, everyone.